Life for me ain't been no crystal stair. It's had tacks in it and splinters and boards torn up and places where there ain't no carpet on the floor. Bare. But I still a climbing on and reaching landings and turning corners. That is an excerpt from a poem entitled Mother to Son by the Langston Hughes. My name is Zahara Williams, and I am a licensed therapist, author, and corporate trainer. Today, I'm here to talk to you all about, well, son, I'll tell you, life for me ain't been no crystal stair. It's had tacks in it and splinters and boards torn up and places where there ain't no carpet on the floor. Bare. But I still climbing on and reaching landings and turning corners. That is an excerpt from a poem entitled Mother to Son by the Langston Hughes. My name is Zahara Williams. I am a licensed therapist, author, and corporate trainer. Today, I am here to talk to you all about discovering purpose after loss. Now, when most people think of loss, they think of it in terms of the death or transition of a family, friend, or loved one. But loss covers a broad spectrum of life experiences. For some, it's the loss of a job. For others, it's divorce. For some, it's the end of a friendship. For some, it's the loss of finances. For some, it is the loss of a house. For others, it's the loss of a car. For some, it's even the loss of abilities. And the impact can be just as vast. There may be those that have feelings of uncertainty and confusion, frustration, doubt, anger, shame, and even guilt. Now, when we think about loss, we often think about things that leave us, that are no longer with us. But it also covers things that we have to release. Now, that is the uncomfortable aspect sometimes of this life journey, is realizing when something is no longer serving you and you have to make a conscious decision to release the thing that you've become so comfortable with. That's also part of the life journey that includes loss. Now, oftentimes when I talk about loss, I share the story of the most impactful loss for me. And that, at one period, was the loss of my grandmother. However, time has happened and other losses have occurred. And so today I want to take you on a different journey and talk to you all about the story of my father. The year was 2016, and my father was diagnosed with chronic kidney disease, which was linked to unmanaged high blood pressure. See, my father, by many accounts, didn't necessarily believe in going to the doctor unless something was seriously wrong, and seriously I'm using that in relative terms. See, he believed that he had sufficient water because he would tell me, you don't see all this water I put in this coffee? Okay, sir. It's plenty of water in this pop. It's mostly water. It's just, this other stuff in here too. Okay, if that's what you believe. He would also tell us, when we asked about vegetables, he would say, I have lettuce and tomatoes on this hamburger. I get my vegetables in regularly. And he was absolutely serious. However, 2016 shifted things. And not only did he become aware, but he also became open to understanding the value and the importance of nutrition. See, my father came from a lineage where his mother, my grandmother, lived until she was 101 years old. And to some degree, he said, Mama didn't need to drink all this water and have all these fruits and vegetables. And she wasn't an unhealthy woman by any stretch of the imagination, but things were different. She also wasn't eating hamburgers and drinking all the coffee and pop either. See, things that we do in the formative or earlier years of our life do have an impact on how we live and what we experience later. And everybody's journey is different. Some people will tell you that they've eaten fried chicken and drank liquor and smoked cigars or cigarettes and they live to be 90 years old, but that will not be everyone's journey. And it surely was not my father's. So he had to shift. He began drinking bottles of water and having smoothies and finding those vegetable medley frozen foods. But even that was problematic. You see, frozen foods have a lot of sodium and kidney disease don't quite go together. And that was frustrating for him because he felt like he was on the right track and things were not getting better. So he had to shift again. So we fast forward to 2019. He's having severe stomach pains. He goes to the doctors. They believe it's something else. He's continuing to be monitored for the kidney, now stage 3 kidney disease. And he's saying, I'm in pain. So I see my father in November 2019 for Thanksgiving, and he is frail. He says, well, I haven't been eating as much because when I eat, it hurts. And I'm like, you need to go to the doctor. And he said, well, they said, and I'm like, you need to go back. And I said, you know what? I have a resolve for that. How about you just come live with me? And I will ask the questions. I will make sure that the tests are run. I will make sure that you are getting the nutrition that you need. I'm not saying you are doing a horrible job, but maybe you could use some support. And that would also, give us more time together because I live in a different state. And he was not having it. He told me, I want you to live your life. I don't want you to feel stagnant. Now, the irony of it is that when my father was in his late 40s, early 50s, he relocated from Michigan to be in Florida with his mother because he wanted to be there during the latter years of her life. And when I brought that up to him, he said, don't do what I do. I said, okay. So as much as I didn't like it, as much as I wanted him here with me in Texas, I had to honor his autonomy because this is what he chose for his life. And I had to go along with it. 2020 comes and we are now all in distress. There is a global pandemic. There is so much uncertainty and my father is home suffering. I say, Daddy, you need to go to the hospital. Because you just told me you have not eaten in several days because it's so painful. His response to me was, well, they said you only go if you're having these COVID symptoms, and I don't have none of those. And I don't want to go there and get sicker. Well, it sounds like you really need to go. Promise me you'll go. Well, I'll think about it. Okay. So I'm texting my father one day about something business related because I wanted him to check some links and make sure they worked. And he enjoyed doing those types of things in his retirement. And he texted me back and said, I'll do it later. I'm at the hospital. Pause. Excuse me, sir. Well, I fell and I couldn't get up, so I had to call the ambulance. Okay. Well, I will check in with you later because we need to know what's going on, and we check with my sisters, and so we can all be on one accord and figure out what, if anything, we need to do. My father was in the hospital for 3 weeks. During that time, the doctors tell us that my father has not one, but 2 forms of cancer that have run rampant and taken over his body. We couldn't even conceptualize that. What are we hearing? When did this happen? So many questions that came up for us. And he even told us, these doctors don't know what they're talking about because there is no way. Well, after that 3-week period, they tell us that our father has to be released to hospice because he can absolutely not go home alone. And at this point, no one has seen him because they're not allowing visitors in the hospital. And that was a rough period. So he goes to stay with his sisters. My father was the baby of 13, and he was the last surviving brother. And of course, he was the baby, so he was the youngest. And they said, we will take care of him. We got it. So he gets there on a Sunday. By Tuesday, I have a conversation with my father, and he tells me, Just know that I always loved you. Once the phone was handed back to my aunts, I said, I will see you all tonight. I booked a flight, called my job, and said, I have to go to Florida to take care of my father. He was just released to hospice, and I don't know when I will be back. I get there late that night, almost early Wednesday morning. I see my father for the first time since November 2019, and he is emaciated, skin and bones. I call my sisters and say, if you want to see him, you need to come now. So my sister comes later that day. My other sister says, I do not want to see him in that condition. She didn't tell us that right away, but she later disclosed that that was the reason she did not come. My father passed that following Saturday. So as we are getting his affairs in order, we're at the house cleaning out, figuring out what's important that we need to keep, what do we need to let go of, and this is going at a rampant pace. He just passed. 2 days later, we're at the house because we both have to at some point go back to our respective homes, and we are now responsible for figuring out what happens next. Well, as we're going through his things, I stumble across these folders and binders of trainings that my father has gone to. Now, my father was a very intelligent man. He was accepted to West Point. If you're familiar with that, it is a pretty prestigious school. However, he chose not to go. Once he was done with the Army, he said, I am done with the Army and the military in general. So he went on to live his life. He worked in customer service and management. And there was something, though, along the path for him that knew that there was something more, that there were other opportunities. So these binders that he collected were what we would now see as coaches calling out to say there are opportunities to grow and scale and niche. So he was intrigued by it. The challenge is, what do you do next? What other information do you need? Who do you connect with? And he was uncertain. So it stopped there. It stopped at gathering all of this information, and then nothing happened. And given that I was already in the entrepreneurial space, this resonated with me. It was like a light bulb went off. That sometimes the journey, we think that once we just get this information, that will be it for us. But sometimes we need more. We need to connect with other people. We need to learn more information. We need to make some sacrifices. We need to exhibit some patience and consistency in the effort and work. And that is something that I have been mindful of along this particular journey. That I have to stay the course. It won't always look like what I'd like for it to. And that was just one of the lessons that I learned. Another lesson that I learned is I talked about my father, who was by no means a chef and would often have hot dogs for breakfast. Don't judge him, that's what he wanted. The power of nutrition. Now, I was already on my own journey. I do believe that him getting sick and starting to have a decline in his health further pushed me to learn about the powers of fruits and vegetables and breaking our fast in the morning with fruits and drinking plenty of water and learning about herbs and their healing power and what they're purposeful for. But that experience taught me the importance of what we do now has an impact on us later. And so I shifted. And that wasn't just for me, because everyone that I am connected with knows about the importance of these things. My friends will be the first to tell you that when they talk about something hurting or feeling out of alignment, I'll say, there's a herb for that. It's my key phrase. Because I want us to be well. And the wellness is physical, but I promise you it also transitions to the mental as well. It allows for clarity and creativity. We know that when we are heavy weighted with food, we get a little sluggish, we get sleepy, and sometimes that creativity gets stunted. But when you are filled with vitamins and nutrients from berries and vegetables, you're energized. You're thinking clearly, you're not heavy weighted, and that was another lesson learned. Because I wonder if my father would have been more in tune with his body and consuming things that was feeding it and nourishing it, if those things that he had an interest in would have gone further, because he would have had the energy, the creativity, the interest to move forward with those things. But we'll never know. So I want you to take a moment and think about the most impactful loss for you. What was it, or what was the circumstance in which you experienced a loss? What was the lesson that you learned from that experience? And what has been the impact? Because lesson and impact are not the same. We can learn something and do absolutely nothing with it. Or we can learn something and we can make shifts and we can see some change and growth. I want you to really think about that. So those were two lessons that I learned from that experience with my father. Yet another one that he shared along the journey. He told me a time or even two, I love that you have developed these friendships and you stay connected to them. I wish I would have done more than that. You see, I'm originally from Detroit. I lived in Atlanta, Georgia for about 12 years, and then I relocated to Texas. And Texas just does not want to let me go, but I am here. And I would go on trips and still go on trips. I meet my friends, they come meet me, I go visit them. And he said, I was so focused on work and climbing the corporate ladder that I didn't develop those connections. I was so focused on family and being there for my sisters after my other brothers passed away and my mom got sick. I wanted to be there for them, but I didn't focus on connections for me. Who was filling his cup? Who was he aligned with that he could share experiences with outside of his sisters? Not many people. And so he had some regrets later on in life. And for me, as much as I already value the connections that I have in my friendship, it made me further cemented in the importance of investing in those friendships, honoring and nurturing those friendships, because they are meaningful not just now, but they will also be meaningful later. They are individuals who show up for me in ways that I need, and I hope I am also showing up for them in ways that they need. That was yet another lesson that I learned through loss. See, sometimes we get so tunnel vision on what is missing and the day that they transition that we forget or neglect to consider the whole picture. So when I'm working with individuals who are dealing with grief and loss, I tell them their life was more than the day they died. Their life was more than the day they died. And for me, I know that to be true. So it's not something I just say to others to get them to reflect, but I know that there are some valuable lessons I learned, not just in his death, but also in his life, that he taught myself and my sisters along the journey that stick with us and very much influence how I show up in life. There was purpose in that. And my father being a part of my life, of him teaching me lessons, even of his transition. There were things that I learned that were necessary for me and again for other people that I am connected with, but that required awareness and intention. There is purpose after loss. And as we know, as I mentioned starting off, life isn't always this wonderful rose petals of beautiful experiences. I like to say it is definitely an ebb and flow. And we don't always do things because do things well and learn from those. We learn sometimes from the trials that we experience in life. It teaches us about ourselves, about our relationships, about our connections. Because as Langston Hughes so eloquently stated, life ain't been no crystal stair. But I will add to that, but that's also not all it is. Thank you for your time.
To get